Love your neighbor, buy local. That's my argument. Love your neighbor, think local. Love your neighbor, be charitable locally, and we will do better in Chattanooga. Chattanooga is a city with many problems, with much wrong that needs to be righted, with oppression from on high, with people who are denied an opportunity to advance by structural reasons, and the like. And yet, Chattanooga is a city that I would say is blessed in many ways by God. The oppressions here are milder than in other cities, and in other states, you have common occurrences. You have harassment of the poor, harassment of minorities. That's much worse than here. I'm thinking of the St. Louis area, where a man with a tag light out will get arrested and fined in every jurisdiction through which he passes if a cop happens to see him. I heard of a case where a man was stopped 2 or 3 times just getting home when he had a tail light out, and he was stopped more than once on the way home because his light was out. A technical fault that has been converted by the transportation statute in that state, in Missouri, into a crime. Now, Judge Neal Gorsuch is a new arrival on the federal bench, and National Review has a story about his opinion that is a parallel opinion to a majority ruling in favor of overturning an official form of harassment against a man who was a criminal man, a man from the Philippines. His name is James Dimaya. He came to the country in 1992 when he was 13, became a lawful permanent resident, where the story says, unfortunately, his behavior has been less than lawful. In 2007 and 2008, he was convicted of a residential burglary. And the Department of Homeland Security says that he should be deported because he committed a, quote, crime of violence, hence covered by a portion of immigration law that, after listing specific crimes such as rape and murder, adds a catch-all category of crimes, quote, involving, quote, a substantial risk that physical force against the person or property of another may be used in the course of committing the offense. So that's a very vague catch-all phrase in the statute. So there was a majority decision, 5-4, joined by Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Stephen Breyer, Sonia Sotomayor, with Gorsuch concurring in the judgment and concurring in much of the opinion in his own opinion. And Elena Kagan writes, the law's category of crime of violence is so indeterminate, fuzzy, she says, that deporting Dimaya under it would violate the Constitution's due process of law guarantee. Vague laws beget two evils, National Review says, that are related. They don't give the citizen a reasonably clear notice of what the behavior is proscribed and prescribed. In other words, what is forbidden and what is required. And vague laws give, and they actually require, judges and law enforcement officials to have excessive discretion in improvising the fuzzy law's meaning. So when you have a vague law, you have excessive discretion. In Tennessee, the disorderly conduct statute is vague on at least two of its 5 main provisions. And it's impossible to understand how you're obeying it. And because it's so widely, it's widely used, and it's widely used because it's so vague and it's wrongly used. It was used against Hanson Melvin. It was used in the case of his neighbor, who was also charged with disorderly conduct in a little pretty operation of perjury by a sworn officer of, at the time, Fred Fletcher. Gorsuch says vague laws invite the exercise of arbitrary power by leaving the people in the dark about what the law demands and allowing prosecutors and courts to make it up. The lack of precise, sufficient certainty, which is stipulated by the English jurist William Blackstone, invites more unpredictability and arbitrariness than is constitutional. Furthermore, the crux, Gorsuch says, the crux, of America's constitutional architecture, the separation of powers, is implicated by that abuse. All legislative power is vested in Congress. The judicial power Gorsuch writes, quote, does not license judges to craft new laws, but only to discern and follow an existing law's prescribed course. With a fuzzy, quote, crime of violence category, Congress abdicated its responsibilities for setting the standard of the criminal law, he says. So allowing vague laws, here's how vague laws overturn constitutional government. Allowing vague laws would allow Congress to hand off the job of lawmaking. Hence, such laws not only illegitimately transfer power to police and prosecutors, but also would leave it all to a judicial hunch. And so, and here now he mentions what's called the Chevron defense, and he attacks this defense. He says it came up in the Supreme Court that propounded it in 1984. This is the policy whereby courts are required to defer to administrative agencies' interpretations of ambiguous laws when the interpretations are reasonable. So what's happened when you have a vague law, the court has up until and still does defer to administrative authority, which is executive branch authority. Let agencies like EPA, IRS, and other agencies, FCC, EPA, and many others, let them in their regulations, because they're experts, right, in that field, let them decide what is reasonable. Gorsuch has criticized this emancipation of the administrative state from judicial supervision as, quote, a judge-made doctrine for the abdication of judicial duty. It also, he says, is an incentive for slovenly lawmaking. That's just a great point. That's a great point. If you have this system as it is, the court letting the executive branch agencies say what's reasonable, then the Congress, Chuck Fleischman, right? Congress, Chuck Fleischman, Senator Corker, Senator Alexander can be slovenly by a Congress too lazy or risk-averse, National Review says, to be precise in making policy choices. And so lacking in institutional pride that it complacently sloughs off its Article I powers into Article II entities. That would be the legislature is sloughing off to the executive branch its authority. Gorsuch wants Article III courts to circumscribe this disreputable behavior. So that is, I may have misstated there, Article I and Article II. I'm not remembering which is which, but there's a wrong transfer of authority from one branch of the executive government, of the national government, to the other, and the executive branch always comes out ahead. And we do live under executive government in many areas. In Nashville, executive government is overseen by Governor Haslam. Now, I've given Governor Haslam administrative notice about the state of the law. He has read my notice. I got a very bland reply letter that says he has given it over to the Department of Safety for review. Well, whatever that means. He's the head of the executive branch, and he is personally liable to any individual, I would suggest, any individual person who is abused by one operating outside the authority of that Title 55, which is transportation. If you're involved in traveling, but you're accused under the transportation statute, you have a duty, I'd like to suggest, have a duty to, first of all, say that you're not under its jurisdiction, you're not in its purview, and then to make a defense that it's an inapplicable use and that you're not in the jurisdiction of the state or the court in that matter. This is David Toulis, and I'm trying to figure out now what we need to get to that's really first. But Gorsuch is explaining to us here in Chattanooga that we need to hold to account the abuses of the three types of government we have. We have executive government in Tennessee, that's Haslam, and executive agencies. We have legislative government, the legislative branch, which is the lawmaking, the legislating branch. And then we have the judicial branch, which is, you could say, the interpretive or the application branch. It applies the law to the facts of particular disputes, whether criminal matters or civil disputes. That's what the judges do. They don't make law, and we could say that they really don't interpret law, but it is generally said that they do interpret law. They apply law to particular sets of facts, and that would be a case, a criminal case or a civil case. Now, I have in my hand here a very a fat book. It's thinner than other numbers of the Tennessee Code annotated. I have my own copy of it. And can I ask you a favor? I don't have a copy of Tennessee jurisprudence. Now, if you know someone who has a copy of Tennessee jurisprudence, I would love to save that set from the heap. Could you let me know about that? Would you be willing to do that? Now, that means you maybe know a lawyer who's moving his offices and is going digital. Well, he's the man who can do me a great favor and give me a copy. Just hand it over to a good home, Tennessee jurisprudence. I would be in that all the time. I'm pretty often in my 1010 code and I'm pretty often in Tennessee, in U.S. American jurisprudence, the multi-volume set. I think it's 120, 130 volumes of law review that I really like to have. Now, the question that I want to talk about in the administrative side of our lives is regarding East Ridge. East Ridge residents got a letter. 5,000 letters were sent out on prop. There are probably I asked Dick Cook this morning, how many properties are involved in this map? There's a redevelopment map that has been created, and it's online at East Ridge News Online. Right at the top there, there's a file that says map. Look at the map, and you can look at it in large scale, and that's important so you can find your own lot. Is your lot one of the red ones? It's a sequence of little blocks of lots that are in this administrative district. It's an administrative district created ostensibly for redevelopment, the East Ridge Housing and Redevelopment Authority. And as I told Dick, I said, Dick, my show and my work as journalist in Chattanooga is really about ideas, the large ideas. And he says, that's fine. I go into the nitty gritty details of reporting, and that's what he does at East Ridge News. So there's a developing story in East Ridge. It's about ideas. It's about reporting, and it's East Ridge News Online, East Ridge News Online, and we're dealing here with questions of authority. And I have not been into this title before that I'm holding up here for my viewer and my formerly newsprint ink stained fingertips, the viewer on Facebook and also the viewer on YouTube at Nooga Radio. And it's volume. Let's see, it's 3B, and it's titles 12 through 15, and it deals with public properties, printing and contracts, public planning and housing, and holidays. So those titles, 3 titles in here covering those topics. And the word eminent domain is thrown about liberally in the one dealing with housing authorities, and also the word blight. And the concern in East Ridge is that these letters have gone out in the creation of this district, which follows the border crossing statute district, indicating that there are people in the government, the city council, Mayor Brent Lambert's offices, maybe the city attorney, and others who have an interest in East Ridge and an interest in business in East Ridge. And they are looking for ways to redevelop the city and to beautify the city. We read in the law some of the uses of the word blight. And blight evokes, guess what? Blight evokes police power. And that is always a thing to be worried about, because in Tennessee jurisprudence, the set that I want you to get me a copy of, right, please. I sometimes make photocopies of the edition at UTC when I do my laundry list of looking things up on LexisNexis there. And I've printed out police powers and read very carefully what that's about. The very first sentence, I think, in that essay says police powers are impossible to define. That's effectively what it says in the encyclopedia for Tennessee law. And yet we have in Tennessee, in our law, we have this power being exercised. And you say, well, David, what is your concern? What are you so wrapped up in these issues for? Why are you so concerned about that? Well, the reason I'm concerned about police powers is police powers are always against the power of the market. And the marketplace doesn't have power in the sense police powers have power. It's not a power of clause and claims and eminent domain and definitions. It's a power that's other oriented. It's customer centric. It is thinking about the other. The marketplace power that I'm defending here on the David Tula Show is about grace. It's about looking out for the other, serving your customer, obtaining capital, saving, delaying pleasure. Right? All those things are part of capitalism. Capitalism is character in operation insofar as money goes. Okay, capitalism is character and the use of good character and Christian virtues put to use for other people, or put to the use, I should say, of other people. That's what capitalism is. Entrepreneurs do that. Every entrepreneur, whatever his beliefs are about God, it really doesn't matter. Every real entrepreneur follows God's template for thinking about the other, putting the other person first. That is the definition of capitalism. And that is the definition of the free market. The free market is a Christian enterprise and a Christian concept. And so is invention. You can't have invention if you don't have care for other people and kind of other centrism, right? You think that's kind of a strange word. I like to say that I'm Dr. Nougat centric. In other words, Chattanooga is the center of the universe. And that's what we believe here at Nougat Radio at 95.3 FM HD4. Chattanooga, East Ridge, Red Bank, Saudi Daisy, we are at the center of the universe. And why is that? Well, because we're here, right? We're here by God's providence, and we're put here for providential purposes in space and time for doing the right thing, doing good, extending mercy, love, grace, charity to other people, and making our customers prosper. That's what capitalism is all about. And so that is my goal here, and being concerned about the use of eminent domain, the evocation by the creation of the East Ridge Redevelopment Authority. It comes under the law. Okay, it's by law. Well, what does the law say? Wow, the law says a lot. It says a lot about power, about seizures, about designations. How is it that somebody is designated a place of blight? How does it come around that your government, your city government, your county government, your state government can say, hey, we don't like the way your house looks. We think you need to mow your lawn a bit more. And your rental property is a slum. Well, who's to say it's a slum? People who live in my rundown apartment building may have to wait 4 days for a commode to get fixed or a leak to be stopped. But I'm doing the best I can. I'm doing the best I can. Blighted areas in Title 1320-201 are areas including slum areas with buildings and improvements that by reason of dilapidation, obsolescence, overcrowding, lack of ventilation. I'm thinking of Jacob Riss's photography series back in the 1910s of New York. Lack of ventilation, right? Light and sanitary facilities, deleterious land use, or any combination of these or other factors are detrimental to the safety, health, morals, or welfare of the community. Welfare of the community does not include solely a loss of property value to surrounding properties, nor does it include the need for increased tax revenues. Under no circumstances shall land used predominantly in the production of agriculture be defined as blighted. Well, that's good. But it goes on to define blighted as deteriorated and not pleasing to us. In the end, the idea of blight it is one of subjective definition. It is subjective because what is your wonderful neighborhood is Robert Moses's blight. Now, Robert Moses was you might say, the autocratic dictator of New York for 25 years after the war, World War II. And he reshaped New York, right? He brought automobile traffic into New York, leveled slums by the scores. The slums are cheap housing, right? You need to have slums. Slums are good. Slums are where people pay a minimum amount to have heat, to be dry, a place to lock their valuables, a place to sleep, maybe to cook meals, to have friends over, right? That all takes place in slums. Who are you, my listener, to look at a rundown housing project and say, man, that's a slum. We need to get rid of that. Well, don't forget, it's a slum because it's got minimal expenses on upkeep, and the people who are there pay minimal amounts. And yet in the statute, we have a very high view of what things should look like, where there may not be enough light. Well, that's a problem. We might need to get rid of that. There's not really enough ventilation. The windows are small, and you can't put window fans in there. There are all kinds of things that suggest neglect and a failure somehow of a meeting of the minds between the landlord and the renter. In a city, you have to have the rich and you have to have the poor. My own idea is that we need to have slums. Slums are important for vibrancy. Slums are where people who are poor can live on the cheap until they do better, right? And then when they do better, guess what? They move on. They move up, and their space is taken by some other person just arriving in Chattanooga with minimal assets, minimal opportunities, and yet he can stay in this cheap place, in this dive, right? He can stay in this dive and get by until he gets that third job that pays more, has better hours, and now he's going to bring his wife and children from Idaho or Florida, some place that's worse off, and he's going to bring them here and prosper in Chattanooga. And he starts off in the slum. The slum is part of the human condition, and just because a slum is ugly and a little messy and may not be picked up, and maybe the grass is not mowed quickly enough, and maybe the repairman is overstressed, overworked, and doesn't get to people in time. Those things may be true, but how can I, David Toulis, your host, condemn that? How can I say that's just blight? We need to put a stop to that. That affects the morals of the people there. If they're a little dirty, if they're a little poor, probably they have bad morals, right? And so I need to get rid of their complex so that all of them will go away and all will be right and true and good here in East Ridge. Oh, look at those houses there. Oh, there's an East Ridge, a whole block of sort of older houses. Man, and those really 1940s shades over the windows. And some of them really aren't very well painted. And, the people living in them, well, there's a guy with an undershirt sitting on his front porch. Wow, look at that. He's unshaven. Man, must not be a very upstanding citizen. He's wearing a wife beater T-shirt, so he probably beats up on his fourth girlfriend. Right? That's what we think about people who are not rich. We look at them somehow as not human. And yet, if you think about that man, if you got to meet him, you'd see he has virtues. And in fact, that's the man there who takes care of the old widow woman four houses down. He does her mowing for her, and he's fixed her leaks, and he's boarded up a hole in her floor, right? That her son doesn't take care of her anymore. He really neglects her. But the neighbor, the man in the wife beater T-shirt, he does that. And he's not even a Christian. And look at the good things he's doing. If he were a Christian, he would be doing much more for her, but he's not. So he's doing what he can, right? He's doing what common grace would give him to do. And so an old neighborhood like that in East Ridge with the poorer people, I would say that's not blight. And I would say the people of East Ridge and other places should look at neighbors and say, not what can we do to condemn you, but what can we do to help you? What can we do to capitalize you? What can we do to provide maybe a new business? Maybe some people on the street can start a lawn mowing service or start a dog walking service to the better off people 4 blocks down in that apartment complex. Maybe we can help them walk the dogs. We can start a little business, right? Well, this is David Toulis, and that's the idea of local economy. That's the idea. I'm a deacon, okay? Almost a lifelong deacon, 20 years of deacon in the Presbyterian Church. That is what local economy is about. And that is what we need. We don't need definitions of blight from the Tennessee Code annotated and local authorities that are going to be swinging their weight around to make things better in East Ridge. I think that's what we don't need. Maybe we need it. Maybe we don't. So you need to tell me what to think about this. Please call me. Tell me, David Toulis, what to think about this. It's 800-8949, 800-8949. Brought to you by yournews.com, yournews.com. Go there today. There's a great, great story, yournews.com. 3, 2,